we begin with this bombshell report from Donna Brazile. So you remember Donna Brazile. Donna Brazile was a CNN commentator, former part of the Al Gore campaign in 2000, and she was made interim head of the Democratic National Committee after Debbie Wasserman Schultz was basically ousted for handing the DNC over to Hillary Clinton and using it as a weapon against Bernie Sanders. And Donna Brazile had already at that point, I believe, been leaking questions to Hillary Clinton, debate questions to Hillary Clinton from the CNN desk before the debate. She was actually let out of her CNN contract. She was essentially fired, as I recall. And she is now coming out trying to explain that she is not at fault, right? She is fine. It's just the DNC that was a wreck. And what she has to say about the Democratic National Committee really does demonstrate that the sort of division that I was talking about, I've been talking about for a year now on this show, the tripartite division inside the DNC, the division between Hillary followers, Obama followers, and Bernie followers is very real, and that Bernie is actually winning this battle. So here are some of the revelations from Donna Brazile's piece at Politico. This is from her new book that is coming out shortly. First of all, Brazile is obviously trying to shield herself. She's obviously doing the "I'm shocked to find there's gambling going on here" routine. She portrays herself as Hercule Poirot, as Encyclopedia Brown, entering the situation and trying to determine where the malfeasance has been at the DNC, like she didn't know. Right? She talks in this article about it's a week before the election, and she's been sussing out how Bernie Sanders got screwed, and she is just so devastated by it. She says, I love this, she says, "Before I called Bernie Sanders, I lit a candle in my living room and put on some gospel music. I wanted to censor myself for what I knew would be an emotional phone call." I mean, really, if you're going to write a movie about yourself, try not to make it so cliche, Donna. I mean, really, you put on candles, you lit candles and put on gospel music? Really? Come on, I guess if she'd been the villain, she would have put on Beethoven, right? That's the way that all the bad movies work. In any case, this is the same lady who, as I say, leaked debate questions to Hillary, now claiming that she was trying to just bring honesty to the Democratic National Committee. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, her predecessor, was a disaster who turned the entire party over to Hillary, according to Brazile. She says, "My predecessor, Florida Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, had not been the most active chair in fundraising at a time when Barack Obama's neglect had left the party in significant debt. As Hillary's campaign gained momentum, she resolved the party's debt and put it on a starvation diet. It had become dependent on her campaign for survival, for which she expected to wield controls of its operations." So according to Brazile, basically what happened is that the Democratic Party had run up on hard times. Obama had cleaned the place out. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz didn't want to do the fundraising. So instead, she went to Hillary and said, "You do all the fundraising. You fill back in that hole. You backfill that gap in our funding, and I'll let you run the DNC," basically. This is according to Donna Brazile. All the Bernie people who were complaining that the thing was rigged, all of Trump's statements that it was rigged against Bernie, all of that was true. Third point here, Obama cleaned out the party. So for all of the talk about how Barack Obama was the great savior of the Democratic Party, the new FDR, the man who had revitalized the Democratic Party, not only did Obama devastate the Democratic Party down ballot, losing over 1,000 state seats in legislatures across the country, losing 13 gubernatorial seats, losing 12 Senate seats. Not only did he do all of those things, he also cleaned them out financially. Brazile says that by the time she took over the DNC, the Democratic Party was broke and $2 million in debt. This is in the middle of an election cycle where Hillary is raising oodles and gobs of cash. According to Brazile, Obama, after 2012, left the party $24 million in debt. $24 million in debt. Okay, Barack Obama, that great beacon of light for the Democratic Party, he basically bankrupted the party. And his campaign said they wouldn't pay it off until 2016. So what did they do? Wasserman Schultz had grown the staff, right? She actually grew the staff. She didn't cut. She didn't put the party on a starvation diet. She grew the staff and allowed the DNC to pick up the check for Obama consultants. So Obama had already run the party into the ground, but the DNC was continuing to pay using the credit card for all of Obama's consultants, which is pretty amazing. So what happened? They turned it over to Hillary, and Hillary was supposed to come in and fill in the gap. So Hillary used that debt to pick up power. Gary Gensler, who is the chief financial officer of the Hillary campaign, apparently, quote, described the party as fully under the control of Hillary's campaign, which seemed to confirm the suspicions of the Bernie camp. The campaign had the DNC on life support, giving it money every month to meet its basic expenses, while the campaign was using the party as a fundraising clearinghouse. And here's where you get into some dicey territory. Hillary Clinton was apparently using the DNC almost to launder money. I mean, not in a strict legal sense, but in a sort of colloquial sense. She was basically using the DNC to launder money. Here's what Brazile explains. She says less than half of 1% of all the money that Hillary raised for the DNC actually went to the state parties. Instead, it all went right back into campaigning for Hillary. Brazil says, when the Politico story described this arrangement as, quote, essentially money laundering for the Clinton campaign, Hillary's people were outraged at being accused of doing something shady. Bernie's people were angry for their own reasons, saying this was part of a calculated strategy to throw the nomination to Hillary, which of course it was. All the money was coming into the DNC vis-a-vis Hillary, and it wasn't being used for Democratic Party operations. It was being used to campaign for Hillary Rodham Clinton personally. So they let Hillary have run of the shop, and she immediately corrupted the DNC in the same way that she corrupted the State Department, in the same way the Clinton Foundation was corrupt. All of which leads to the sixth point here. Bernie got completely jobbed. Okay, Bernie got completely jobbed. If the DNC had not handed all of its operations over to Hillary, to the point where Hillary for America was basically running the DNC from Brooklyn, from her Brooklyn offices, every press release from the DNC apparently had to be vetted through Hillary's office. If that had not been happening, Bernie probably wins the nomination, or at the very least, it's an extraordinarily close race, even closer than it ended up being. Brazil basically admits that Hillary was in charge of the DNC from August 2015. August 2015. The first primaries didn't take place until January 2016. So before Bernie was even seriously running, the party had been turned over to Hillary Clinton, a candidate for the nomination, which is insane. Brazil says, quote, the funding arrangement with HFA, that's Hillary for America, and the Victory Fund agreement was not illegal, but it sure looked unethical. If the fight had been fair, one campaign would not have control of the party before the voters had decided which one they wanted to lead. And all of this leads to the final point here. It is very obvious that Bernie Sanders lost the battle in 2016, but he absolutely won the war. If Bernie had won the nomination, maybe he doesn't beat Trump, right? Maybe he's just a crazed old loonbag socialist from Vermont who couldn't defeat Donald Trump, and Hillary is sitting somewhere crying into her beer, and we get Hillary running again in 2020. But Bernie Sanders didn't win the nomination. And now the widespread perception, apparently correct, is that Bernie Sanders was cheated out of the nomination by the Democratic Party establishment. And so Bernie can now run as the anti-establishment outsider again in 2020 and as the loyal soldier. Because according to Brazil, she went to Bernie with all of this 1 week prior to the election. Bernie didn't say, I want to blow this up or I'm going to go public with this. Instead, Bernie swallowed hard and he said, I'm going to campaign for Hillary against Trump. If Bernie runs for the nomination in 2020, he will win the nomination in 2020 and he may win the presidency, which is very scary for the country. Very frightening for the country. Okay, but Bernie Sanders is now where the power lies in the Democratic Party, and Brazil is making that clear. Donna Brazil is a political animal. Donna Brazil is a political survivor, and what she's doing here is she's basically tossing Hillary Clinton to the wolves so that she can get in good with the Bernie Sanders folks, who she feels are the next wave in the Democratic Party. And you can see this, right? All of the major Democratic players in 2020 are already endorsing Medicare for all. They're already moving along Bernie Sanders' lines, trying to outflank Bernie Sanders. Good luck with that. Their only hope is that Bernie stays out of the primaries in 2020 and then endorses someone. That is their only hope. If Bernie runs in 2020, he will win the Democratic nomination. He will defeat Joe Biden. He will defeat Kamala Harris for sure. Bernie Sanders will have the power of revenge behind him. Plus, Bernie Sanders has a better feel for what voters want to hear in some of the swing states that Hillary lost than Hillary Clinton did. There's a significant possibility that Bernie Sanders is president in 2020 because of Hillary Clinton. Okay, if that's not scary to you, then you haven't been following Bernie Sanders' career in any significant way. So that's the news out of Democratic land, where they've torn each other apart. Bernie Sanders owns the party because Hillary Clinton corrupted the party and Barack Obama bankrupted the party.
News that came out today, George Papadopoulos. He admitted, okay, he lied to the FBI. I think he's 29 years old. Now, I knew everybody in the Trump campaign. I never heard about Papadopoulos until today. And I think I knew everybody. Now, the White House says he was a volunteer, and it seems that Papadopoulos, on his own, was trying to create an anti-Clinton Russian dossier, like the Fusion GPS, Hillary DNC, President Obama-funded dossier, and he wasn't successful. So now that we have no Trump collusion, here's what we do have tonight.
I think the real issue is Papadopoulos. I just like saying the name Papadopoulos. But Papadopoulos, what he did, Hillary did 10 times worse. Oh my. Hillary was the one that paid millions of dollars to dig up Russian dirt, to collude, and to influence an election and possibly an investigation. Papadopoulos is just some 30-year-old overly ambitious guy that tried to dig up dirt, failed. Remember Brian Fallon, Hillary's spokesperson, said getting opposition research dirt from foreigners is a good thing, and then tried to set up a meeting between Trump and Putin. That got killed by the Trump campaign. So maybe he's cooperating now. There are some emails going back and forth. The White House provided the investigators with those emails, but now I'm hearing something like he may have been wearing a wire, which I think scares everybody in the swamp.
Well, listen, if nothing else, Bill, they are consistent in their messaging. They're saying repeatedly, and I've talked to quite a few this morning, listen, nothing that happened yesterday has changed the narrative that there was no collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, although it is important to point out the president has been talking about it. Not on camera, by the way. He's been on Twitter. Let me share for the folks at home just a little bit what the commander-in-chief is saying about it once again. The fake news is working overtime. As Paul Manafort's lawyer said, there was no collusion, and events mentioned took place long before he came to the campaign. He goes on to add, few people knew the young, low-level volunteer named George, who has already proven to be a liar. Check the Dems. He adds this, I hope people will start to focus on our massive tax cuts for business, jobs, and the middle class, in addition to Democrat corruption. Now, the low-level volunteer, Bill, that he's referring to is George Papadopoulos, who's been cooperating with the feds since his arrest over the summer. He pleaded guilty yesterday to lying to federal authorities. Meanwhile, former campaign chair Paul Manafort charged with a number of financial crimes for failing to register as a foreign agent as well after lobbying for a group in Ukraine. But White House officials, again, quick to point out much of what he's accused of happened years ago and had nothing to do with the 2016 campaign. As for suggestions by the Washington Post, the White House is in panic mode. Attorney Ty Cobb telling Fox, this is farcical. The president is focused on preparations for serious diplomatic activities facing him over the next 2 weeks in Asia. Certainly that is something they would love to be talking about instead of what is happening out of the special counsel.
It's a big trip with a lot on the line, too, internationally. Yeah. One report yesterday said the White House was in some sort of panic mode. What are you hearing about that, and what are officials saying about that report?
Yeah, let me put it to you this way. Categorically false. That's what White House officials are saying. In fact, they point out to this fact. Ty Cobb wasn't even in D.C. yesterday morning. He was in South Carolina. Attorney John Dowd wasn't at the White House yesterday. Now, they do acknowledge the president was briefed, Bill, over the phone, but that's it. As for the idea that the president might decide now to fire Robert Mueller, Jay said this.
There is no conversation regarding firing Robert Mueller, and there's no basis to fire Robert Mueller on anything that we've seen. So I will say this. The president has not indicated to me or to anyone else that I work with that he has any intent on terminating Robert Mueller. And the way it would work is you could only terminate a special counsel for cause, and we just don't see any basis for cause.
No basis for cause. In fact, I was told by a White House official off the record that if you're pushing this narrative, this idea that the president is somehow drumming up this effort to fire Bob Mueller, it's just not factual. We'll have to see if it plays out in a different way in the weeks and months ahead. Of course, this week, as we continue to look forward to an announcement about the Fed chair, the push for tax reform, as you and I have talked about, and, of course, the Asia trip. I have a briefing to get to right now, so I'll be talking to you about that from overseas.
Does Sarah Sanders brief today, Kevin?
Yep, 2 o'clock this afternoon. I'll be there for you.
You got it. Thank you, Kevin Cork, North Lawn there.